Hi guys, I'm starting my first fanfic story reading called The Moon's Child by Spirit of Fantasy. This is Chapter 1, Prologue. There are people who have had bad days, and there are people who have bad lives, but Danny Matheson had the worst life a boy of his age could have. He had no one but his father in his life, and his father was as bad could get. His mother had died 5 years ago, and it tore the boy apart. But Danny was different from other kids that were in his situation. He was a tough 10-year-old boy who had grown strong and defiant of his father's cruelty, but his bad boy attitude is what kept him from making friends in school. He became a loner of a sort, and was never the type to talk to people. He would never admit it, but he was afraid that if people knew what his life was like, there was no knowing what would happen to him. Teachers had even tried, but he always kept quiet so he could avoid an even worse fate than normal at the hands of defiant and tough. To this day, he remains a loner and a broken child. No friends, no loved ones, no nothing. But little did he know that by the end of this day, he was about to experience a whole new life like no other. It was the end of the school year for Danny at his school in Colorado. The sun shined bright as the school bell rang, and with it the whole parade of children burst out the doors of school. The crowd flowed as they filled the buses and began to ride off to begin. It was only after a few more minutes that Danny finally emerged from the school in nothing but a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and blue sneakers. He let out a sigh as he casually walked down the concrete stairs to go home. He could feel the gentle breeze blow through his black hair as he kept his head low and stared angrily at the ground as he walked on. "Hey, Danny Matheson, can I speak with you a moment?" called out a female teacher. Danny looked out the corner of his eye and could see his teacher calling to him, and immediately began speed walking. The teacher responded by walking down the stairs to catch up to the boy, but that only encouraged him to go into a jog as he ran away from the teacher. "Just leave me alone!" Danny yelled as he crossed the road and stopped on the other side. Cars and buses went across the roads, blocking him off from the teacher that tried to pursue him. He stared angrily as he watched the teacher back towards the school. Seeing that the issue was over, he let out his own sigh as he put his hands in his pockets and began walking casually down the street towards his home. He did not say a word as he stared lazily at his shoes with each step he took. No more school meant he was stuck at home more often, and that was something he didn't want. He tried not to think about it as he then stared up at the clear blue sky and the bright sunshine as it glared in his eyes. He growled while rubbing his eyes in pain and kicking a stop sign. "Ow!" he shouted as he gripped his foot in pain. He berserk as he punched and shook the stop sign. As he struck the stop sign, he began picturing that it was his father's head and began hitting it even harder until his knuckles started to bleed. After a few more minutes, he stopped and did his best to hold back tears of pain as he rubbed at his sore and bleeding knuckles. He then let out a small growl as he then chose to walk off again. For a good 30 minutes, he walked along the sidewalk, completely distraught and angry. Each step, he was traveling further downtown as the buildings began to get ratty and rigid. Finally, he made it to his home and slowly walked up the stairs to his small apartment building. But he stopped at the door as he began hearing activity and street slang being thrown. He turned around and could see a bunch of kids in protective gear playing street hockey. They looked like they were having a good old time, as one team had actually scored and was cheering about. "Yeah, now that's what I'm talking about. All you homies saw that, right?" one kid said as he cheered for himself. "That's only 1 point, fool. This game ain't over yet. Come on, let's play ball, bros," another kid shouted. Suddenly, I was looking right at them, and all stopped the game to acknowledge the kid that only knew as the quiet, angry boy they didn't know the first thing about. Danny just gave them a look as he opened the door and went inside. He then slammed the door shut, making all the boys jump a little inside as they turned up their noses at him. "Geez, what is that kid's damage? He's always a grouch and a downer about stuff," one kid asked. "I don't know, but I hear his dad drinks a lot, and you know how that can play out," another answered. "Hey, come on. None of that crap is our business. Let's just get back to the game, alright?" The first guy, and they all began their game again. Meanwhile, he had made up and walked all around his house. There wasn't much to see of it. A small TV, for two, a hardwood floor that had a small red rug between the couch and TV. The walls were made of brick, and he knew it was never a good idea to be near the wall when his dad was around. He let out a small sigh as he began to feel hungry and chose to get something from the kitchen. Room, now realizing that his dad wasn't around at the moment. A bit, knowing that he had the house himself for a little bit. He couldn't be more relieved to know that. He made it to the kitchen and it felt so quiet to him that he went over and chose to sneak something out of the cabinet. He fumbled around the kitchen cabinets before pulling out a bag of potato chips. And moving his way to the fridge with an empty cup in his hand. He set the cup down and began messing around the fridge before pulling out a gallon of milk and filling his cup up with it. He then put the jug back in the fridge and carried both his cup of milk and the bag of potato chips into the living room. He got back and sat down on the red rug while putting his chips and milk right next to him. He then reached for the TV and turned it to watch cartoons while he enjoyed his favorite beverage and snack. For hours he sat in front of the television while he snacked on his chips, but it was not much longer before he started to feel tired. He let out a yawn as he turned to a window and could see the sun being replaced by the night. He then let out another yawn as he chose to call it a night. Suddenly, as he turned off the TV, he then felt himself freeze as he heard the door slowly squeak open. With it, he could hear heavy boots stomping across the hardwood floor. He did his best to swallow his fear. He could hear the heavy footsteps stop right behind and could smell the overwhelming stench of alcohol hitting his nose unmercifully. "What are you doing watching my TV? Eating my food?" growled a big, burly male voice. "I was just about to turn it off and go to bed," Danny blankly said. He was then blindsided as he felt the first crack him in the side of the head, knocking. He gripped his head with one hand while using another to help himself back up. He panted as he turned his head and could see a white sleeveless shirt and a large cowboy boot staring him down as he held a can of beer in his hand. "Boy, I pay for all food and drink in this place. That makes all this mine. You understand me, boy?" the man yelled as he put his foot down on Danny's chest. Danny tried to say something, but he felt the heavy boot crushing him and could not even breathe. He did his best to take the pain and felt the lights fade and a sudden pop go off in his ribs. He then screamed as he felt the jolt of pain surge through his torso. He gripped his ribs in pain as he felt himself get released by the boot and picked up by his neck. "You didn't injure me, boy. You understand me?" the man said as he slapped Danny across with his free hand. Danny groaned and held himself in pain as he shook with pain, fury, and sadness, then slowly lifted the burly man. He had Danny's black hair, but he also had a prickly grayish and black beard to go with it. The stench of alcohol from the man's breath was overwhelming, but Danny continued to hold himself together. "You're drunk, Dad," Danny said in defiance as he was suddenly released from the man's grip. "What did you say to me, boy? What did you say to me?" the man roared in a drunken rage as he suddenly punched Danny across the jaw and made him go down again. Don't you tell me I'm you worthless pile of crap. I'll be where I wish, whether you like it or not. Danny's cheek burned and pulsating fire as he held his throbbing face in pain. He slowly got back up and growled at the man as he had to stay on his feet. Thankfully, his father just spat in his face as he sat down through. He stared lazily at the TV while Danny saw his and he quietly walked up the rickety wooden stairs to his room. And creaked as he slowly climbed up them, while still feeling pain all over his body. Every part from his face to his body hurt as he barely managed to make it up. Through all the pain he was feeling, none of the pain came close to what he was feeling inside. Half his body dead as he felt tears starting to leave his eyes, but quickly fought them off, knowing that crying would only make it. He slowly got off his bed and slowly walked toward. He did his best to ignore the pain as he opened up the closet and began to undress. So he could see old scars and bruises all over himself, not to mention a new bruise that was forming over his cheek, and the blackening bruise over his they they might be. He looked away from his battle scars. He slipped on a long-sleeved striped pajama shirt and long pants to match.